The goal of this was to hook this car up some more. Bye-bye spring, bye-bye adjuster. Got a new door. You can also see how bad the damage was. So we got ERs for the S550. For these, I basically spec'd it out so we had a little bit more stroke in the front. So we were more centered in the shock. Before we were using like the 60 to 90% of the shock. Now we're using like the 40 to 70%. So just a little bit more towards the center of the shock shaft. Also, two ways, which gains us rebound adjustment and compression separate, which this car, I feel like, was finally at the point where it needed it. The rebound transfers weight to the rear, so when you take rebound out of the front, you can control how fast it'll transfer to the rear. And then obviously the bump or the compression controls the actual compression of the shock and the spring rate that we run, which is really high. So this will allow me to get some of the bounce out of the front end while keeping it more planted with the two ways. I'm not normally someone who says every car needs two ways, but I think we kind of maxed this car out on the singles for what we had to drive in the box, like the particular tire size we wanted to keep running without changing the entire rear subframe over to like the FD stuff. We were kind of maximized on where we're at. I don't really want to remove a ton of weight out of this and make it into something that it's not. It's meant to be just a street car that drifts really well. So shocks were next on the list. I went down in spring rate in the front about 200 pounds. I think it was a little on the stiff side. I might end up putting them back on later now that we have compression and rebound adjustment, but I figured I'd hit two birds with one stone on that. We also changed the ride height a little bit in the front. I lowered it a tick more, so it's about a ½ inch lower, which is a little bit based off the spring rate and then a little bit off the actual coilover body itself. I opted to go with stainless lines on this just because there's a lot of movement in the front. The style that has a peg coming out of the side during adjustment or anything, if it gets hit, it could potentially bend, break, or whatnot. So it's a little bit safer to run the stainless lines on this type of an application. Doing some testing on a proprietary spring for this car. The spring that was in here before was a 230 millimeter. This is a 210. It's a little bit shorter, but we still have plenty of adjustment, so you can go really low if you want. And also, it's a little bit softer in the spring rate. So I'm testing this to see if it works, and then hopefully we'll be able to offer that with a package later because we don't have any differences in the rear springs. Basically, we're stuck with what we got. So this will give another spring option that's a little bit softer. The rear, again, with the two ways. We got mounts coming for these so I can mount them up in this area. We just wanted to see how the routing would work currently, which is where we're at. Again, with the stainless line on the reservoir. Another really cool thing is we got a monoball top hat from BC now, which should be available soon. This used a stock upper shock mount before, and it really needed a monoball up there instead of a rubber bushing so the shock could work better and be more responsive because you suck up a lot of the movement of the shock in the rubber bushing. Also, depending on your alignment settings and how the car is, the shock can start moving forward or back, and the monoball centers that back. So just overall, a little bit more road noise for people on the street, but we already have a spool in this and a bunch of loud crap and a solid subframe bushing. So upgrading to that was really cool, and BC has that option now. That also gives you about an inch more of upward travel in the shock, which is really cool because we were limited on that before, and this is going to make a big difference. The goal of this was to hook this car up some more and make it so that we don't have to run such low tire pressures. Typically in this car I run like 12 PSI, and I'd like to be back up to like in the 20s and still have a competitive car in terms of driving with people for fun. And I think this is going to make that last little bit of change. I'm pretty excited about it. We also got a new door. Chelsea painted the door for us. You can also see how bad the damage was from getting hit.
Yikes.
It's like pushed in probably 5 or 6 inches up here and a few inches down here. The good news is it didn't really get into the rocker, so I'm probably going to take a piece of flat steel here, connect that so that I can have something to fasten this back down to, and the side skirt, and then it'll be covered up and you'll never really notice it. This car eventually will get crushed anyway at this point, so the goal is really to just get it to look good again and not detectable from the outside. We've got some wheel bearings coming for this thing. They're really bad right now.
Ooh.
Bearings are trashed. It's really, this wheel and tire combo weighs like 80 pounds, and we go through a lot of tires and wheels on this thing, so it's time for some new wheel bearings. So I'm kind of going through and removing things from the engine bay, and I'm kind of at a point where I'm gonna now just take the parts off that need to get cleaned and get them cleaned and then pressure wash the engine bay. We got rid of all the evap stuff is gone. That was all here. Excuse my entire wire harness sitting over here. We started putting in some DT connectors for, which are these guys here, for boost control and all that. And we're gonna go through and disconnect. Like, we don't need any of this anymore. So we're gonna basically undo that because we don't need it anymore. We got rid of all of the EGR and stuff related to the motor. On this side, we don't need any of that. We switched over to a new intake manifold that won't have any of that anyway. Over here, I had cruise control still, but it never worked because A, because of the link, and B, because I just don't really use it in this car. It's not really a road trip car at all. And also the motor for the actual throttle was broken, so I had to get another one. I'm like, not worried about it. We wanted to add this thing because I felt like I did a bad job explaining it. When I said I removed a bunch of stuff, it was like basically all these pieces and this 2-piece lower radiator hose, which sucks. So I got a 1-piece one from the 99 Miata. I don't know where it's at. I've already lost it. It's in here somewhere. I don't know. But it just looks like that for just 1 piece. It's pretty much ready for pressure wash, clean. Carlos has done all the machine work to my motor, so that's done. He's just off final assembly. If you are wondering why I didn't build the motor, I don't build engines. I'll assemble heads and do that stuff, but I haven't dedicated my life to building motors, and I'd rather give it to somebody who does. So that's gonna be good. Mala pistons that are 9.5 to 1. Came in, and I'm hoping it'll just do like 300 pretty strong with a 99 head and all that stuff at like the same boost, maybe even less boost than we were at before. And we'll just have a long, steady, consistent power band that's kind of the best of the best with the OE Miata world, just with forged internals. So. Gone through the shop and found the parts we need. I don't know exactly what spring rate we're gonna do. The motion ratio is like 30 or 40% higher than what I currently have, and I was running like a 3.5K spring, so like a 180 pound-ish spring. Moving it outboard, I kind of want to go down to something that's like 130 or 140 pound spring, so I've got that here. They only make it in a barrel, which is obviously larger diameter. This is a standard one here. So I'm gonna put these on to see if they clear. We'll start with these, and then, which will be nice because it'll give us a little bit more stroke and spring movement. And if they don't work, then we have some other stuff we can try back at the house. So we're gonna go ahead and pop this together now. Got our spring collars on there, spring isolator, and the boot, spring. Kind of made this whole setup here. We gotta find a new isolator, but other than that, this spring seat's gonna go on here. Got a monoball top hat here, which is offset. Let me spin these back up here. I don't know if this spring is gonna make all the stroke we need it to make. We'll have to test it when we get it back home on the press. It should be close. If not, we have much longer springs here. This is just the correct rate that I wanted. The top hat is offset, which is gonna help us get some clearance away from the body. The inside has plenty of room, but the outside has like a little cutout channel that we'll show you when we install it. And basically what we're doing is just converting this to a true coilover because the anti-squat brackets on my car, every time you change them up and down, you have to change the spring height because the spring sits on it. So right now, this will make it so the ride height stays very, very close to the same with the anti-squat changes, and I can just zing them in and out and not really worry about it. Big ups to BC for letting me come here and search through all their stuff to kind of build out this true coilover setup. I've got the other setup on the car back home, so I'll show you guys a comparison of the two and kind of explain it some more, but we've got the right parts, and we're gonna go. And we brought extra springs too. Lots of extra springs. Okay, so we have our true coilover that we just got done building at BC. Again, big ups to them for getting me this setup. I'm excited to try it. Here is the same shock, body, and all of that without the true coilover installed. I went ahead and installed it just so that I could see the fitment of it and get the lengths and measure for a spring properly. If you notice, between this point here and here, it's about 60% of the way. This spring is about 60% of the way between here and here. So that means the current spring rate that is on here will be almost double what it is on here. So if you have a 5K here, 260 pound spring, and you put it on here, it's gonna effectively be like a 9.5K, 9K. So a lot stiffer. So we're running 3.5s on here, which I do believe was a little on the soft side. It was working well, I was getting good side bite from it, but it was a little on the edge. So now we're gonna go to the true coilover, which we have a 2.5 on here, so it's about 60% less. So I think we're right on the money for the spring rate itself. And then we have the old version over here, which is the small body. This is just an off-the-shelf SN95 kit. When I built this car out originally, they didn't have a Fox body kit, so we just used that, and it did fit, and everything was fine. But smaller body, which I'm not a fan of because of the piston design in it, even though it's very, very similar design. Having a lot bigger body, more fluid, larger shock body, easy to replace with normal springs and build a true coilover out of was obviously a bit ideal. So right now we're kind of looking at everything, going over, making sure everything's gonna fit. I think the spring that we picked, that I was worried about the width, is gonna be very, very close to the tire. We'll see. But overall, we're gonna pop this thing on and see what it does. Bye-bye spring. Bye-bye adjuster. The spring is not gonna work. Doesn't fit. The diameter of this is too big.
Ooh.
It's really close, but it won't lay flat without cutting the body up, which at this point is not something I really want to do. I think when we do the axle and do all that, it would be easy to do, but I could enlarge the hole here and set it in from the top and put the studs in the other way. I could also take a monoball housing and bolt it to a plate and then weld the plate to the body. There's a lot of different ways to do it, but this easy solution is not going to work. I thought it would work, but it's just a little bit too big. So the Fox body also was kind of at limitations with the single adjustments. I kind of could have built a fresh set of singles to be valved kind of what I wanted, but also BC was like, look, you're on not a Fox body kit, and like we're just going to build a Fox body kit, and if you want two ways, we're going to do it now. So I was like, okay, cool, we'll do that instead. So the singles were on here before. A little shorter of stroke on these, and the valving was not valved for the spring that's on there. They're valved for like a standard 8 or 9K. I have 20s on there, so way out of the valving range. I was having the shock basically locked down, which you don't want ideally, so made it work, found out if it worked, but now we're building a new shock with better valving. So we got these now. I've got some clamps coming for these still too. They're just set up there to make sure the clearance and everything was gonna work. So we've got a helper spring on here now. So that way we can have some more droop with the spring that we have. I had no droop because the spring was so stiff that basically whenever you jack the car, it would lift the wheel off the ground. So it would three-wheel, which is fine, the three-wheel, but you want a three-wheel in a controlled way with the shock, not just by extending the shock all the way. Right now, before the helper spring, I had only like a 1/2 inch at max of droop. And now we have basically 2 1/4 inches of droop. So we're back into the sweet spot of the shock again, using more of the middle of it. Plus now my tire should want to stay on the ground a little bit more. Hopefully give me a little bit more feedback at high angle. Kept the same spring rates, added the helper. Now we got the 2 ways. We can decide how quickly we want to transfer the weight and have good control over the spring with the 2-way. Okay, so it didn't work out today. This setup will work. Everything is correct lengthwise, but the top hat, E36 offset top hat that I was going to try to run in the rear isn't going to fit. This is too large. It doesn't allow it to bolt into the spot. So basically what I'm going to do is take some time and order some plates to cut that section of the car and basically build a small shock box, shock mount box, so that this can fit inside of it. We already have it tied into the cage down the side of it, so it should be really easy to have something that's strong, well built, and will allow us to house this. It will also allow us to place this exactly where it needs to be to gain clearance over the frame rail and the tire, but we have to leave to go to testing, so I wanted to go ahead and knock this out, but it's just not going to happen. So we're going to have to do it another day. I'm going to order the stuff to do it, and we'll kind of plan it out and do it right. We probably could have come up with a solution today to get it done, but it wasn't going to be right. And I want to get this right because the next axle that we put in here will still use these same shocks and the same everything, so we're going to do it that way. for right now, I'm gonna put it back and just have the 2-ways on there with the springs, so that way it's back up and holding itself off the ground. If I need to drive it, I could. And then eventually when we have a whole day to dedicate to building out these rear towers and stuff, we'll do that. It's kind of nice because I don't have any rules to build this car under like FD or anything, so I'm like, I don't like that. I'm just gonna cut it and weld it in. You would never be allowed to do that in FD, so it's cool. All right, guys, later.